So in this last video segment, I want to go ahead and talk about a cluster of related issues. So something that often comes up in economics is what's called the principal-agent problem. And the principal-agent problem refers to a situation where you have the principal, who is someone who has the right to make a decision, who might be, say, for instance, the owner or the employer or the customer. And then you have the agent, who they hope will act on their behalf. So in some sense, the principal is delegating to the agent. And sometimes the principal is delegating to the agent because the principal just has other responsibilities, so a supervisor might delegate to a lower level employee. But in other instances, the principal delegates to the agent because the agent has specialized knowledge that the principal doesn't. But in all these cases, we have this problem of asymmetric information, that the agent knows whether or not they're doing their job conscientiously more than the principal does. And one way of looking at all this stuff about contracts and incentives is, how does the principal design a set of incentives so that the agent has the incentive to act in the principal's best interest? And sometimes the principal has the knowledge to do that. But in other situations, the principal doesn't have the specialized knowledge to be able to assess the agent's performance. So how do we deal with this? And one way of dealing with it is we hope we have people who have a sense of professional ethics. And so this gets us into the concept of, well, what does it mean to be a professional and have professional ethics? And it's often said that there's a conflict here between being a professional with a strong sense of ethics and sort of maximizing your economic success in terms of conventional monetary success. And I'm going to sort of get into some of this by talking a little bit about an article that was published in the Journal of Economic Perspectives, which is, a pretty readable economics journal. It's not very mathy compared to others. And this is in it's in volume 27, issue 4, published in fall 2013. And the name of the article is Reclaiming Virtue Ethics for Economics. And this sort of gets a little bit into the intersection of economics and philosophy. And so I'm going to go ahead and give a super abbreviated version and mostly allow you guys to go and read this for yourselves. So the idea here is there's this concept called a practice. A practice is a kind of social interaction. So a type of action or interaction. So we might say the practice of farming is there's a whole set of cultural beliefs about what it is to be a farmer. And there's a whole way in which we believe a farmer should act. And then the question often is, what is the sort of point, the end point or objective? What is the objective of the practice? And some philosophers say that, yes, there are sort of ends that everyone adheres to in a practice. Other people sort of look at it a little bit more decentralized and sort of say, well, this whole idea of everyone coming to the practice at a common objective or mindset is a little bit fishy. We have a pretty diverse population out there, but let's go ahead and run with it. So the idea here is a virtue is a character trait that helps people successfully pursue the objective of the practice. Okay, so virtue is a character trait that aids the pursuit of the objective or telos. Okay. And notice that different forms of social activity are going to have different objectives. So, you know, something that's a virtue in accounting is not a virtue in being a stand-up comedian. And something that's a virtue in being an undertaker is not a virtue when it comes to being a, you know, ballerina or something like that. These are different forms of life, and they have different character traits which enable you to be successful in them. So this is the overall background to the article. And then the question is, well, is the market, is behavior in a market a practice? And the authors say, yes, it is. Clearly it's a complex set of social interactions. And then what's the objective? They say the objective is mutual benefit. That the idea is that markets bring together people for mutual benefits. And then what would be the virtues associated with that? Now, how does all this relate to the principal-agent problem? What I'm going to say is that sort of commonly, most people say that professionals should just be professionals and do whatever is in their professional judgment. And there's a certain sense to that, but that sort of leads to a kind of authoritarian model. You say, for instance, think about a doctor or a professor or an auto mechanic or an architect. If they just always do whatever they think is best, then implicitly they're sort of saying that, well, the customer doesn't know anything. And that we should just do what's best and the customer should just deal with it. So I should just teach what I feel like teaching, and I shouldn't pay any attention to the needs of my students. Or the doctor should just, you know, operate or not operate as they think best and not take the patient's considerations into account. To me, at least, that seems pretty clearly crazy. On the other hand, you wouldn't want someone to completely abandon the idea that they might have some knowledge to bring. So there's this sort of tension between the professional criteria of the professional should do what is best and the market criteria of the market, the customer is always right. And the question is often how to balance the internal professional criteria versus the criteria of mutual benefit, of market interaction. And virtue ethicists, at least some virtue ethicists, say, you know, this is what life's about. Life is about having different competing claims and trying to find the balance between them. How do you find the balance between being a good member of your workplace or being a good employee and being a good citizen and being a good member of your family? How do you find the balance between all the different things that compete for your allegiances? And it may be that there's just no easy answers to this. There's nothing I can write on the back of a 3x5 card that will enable you to do this. You have to work through these things slowly. And that's what makes life interesting and what makes ethics something that we can't settle on a blackboard just as easily as all that.